Bonnie's still connecting. There she is. Let's join in prayer. Loving God, we gather this day to discuss your word and how we might allow your spirit to fill us and lead us to share your good news within our congregations. Guide us, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, for those of you who don't know me, I am Mandy Miller. I am the pastor of Holy Cross in Reading, and we are a church with two campuses, one in Reading, downtown, and then the other, it's an 8-minute commute on a Sunday morning between the two campuses in Berkshire Heights. I will not call it Wyomissing. I will not call it West Reading. I will call it Berkshire Heights because that's how we are. And it's not just Reading. I served in Philadelphia as well. And I was not in lower Northeast. I was in Juniata Park. So I've learned to be very specific. Well, I've learned, but I also forget because I think sometimes it's just annoying. So I've been at Holy Cross for quite a while, initially as a pastor of visitation, and then gradually increasing as my children's time in school began increasing. It's been a great relationship, and I think it's a model of what we could do to encourage young elders within the tradition, because it allowed me to serve a church while also having kids and finding that balance, which worked really well. So Dawn got called in to, I can't think of the word of it, the huddle of all of the yeses and the bishop. Whatever that cabinet, that huddle. It's football season, into the huddle. So that huddle. So that is where she is. And I guess after having known me for the duration of my time in this conference, which is about 18 years I've been here, I guess she figured I was able to go ahead and run with these passages that we have today. So this is all a little weird for me because I usually do not begin my sermon this early in the week. I would typically read the passage and have an idea as to what they say, what they do, where I might want to go. But I am a percolator. I learned that word at some point shortly after seminary to describe the way in which I write a sermon, and that I just kind of let it brew in my head. And then on Thursday morning, when all things go according to my plan, it just starts being able to write it out. I am a PK squared, which means both of my parents are ordained ministers. And my dad served congregations for several years, and it always frustrated him to see my sermon technique, because he would do draft after draft, and I'm usually a one draft type of person. And that doesn't mean we just have different styles, right? Both of them work, his for him, mine for me. So it was a bit early that I had to look at these passages. I had already decided that I would preach on Job. I usually decide about a month out where I will be going and what I'll be choosing, so that then I can give information to the secretary, the musician, and they can fill in around me. I also recognize that this week is Laity Sunday for many congregations, so it might be laity in the pulpit rather than the appointed individual. Holy Cross used to celebrate Laity Sunday, and then COVID hit and we canceled it, and I may or may not have not reminded the folks about Laity Sunday, which it's nothing against the laity. We just have it's become bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And the focus hasn't been so much on what the laity are doing at the local congregation level. And yes, hence for lower attendance today. You're probably right, Lori. But I think it just got to be huge, and huge in the wrong ways, and focusing in the wrong things at Holy Cross. But I will be sure to mention laity in my prayers and in some other aspects of the service, but not so much having someone else come and preaching and having the luncheon and deciding who gets the laity award this year. I'll remind our laity that we forgot that, but we kind of dropped that. So we're in Job, is the passage that I decided that I would preach on, mainly because Job has been in the lectionary. I believe this is our third Sunday with Job. The other 2 Sundays, I didn't hit on him because I forget why I didn't. Because October 3rd was World Communion Sunday, and so I wanted to deal with World Communion. This past Sunday, I've been at this for 20 some odd years now. And so when I was asked to do the Vespers for confirmation camp at Gretna Glen, I decided I would use that same sermon in the pulpit on Sunday morning. And I think Lori has it been in for 4 weeks. I just have 3 weeks for Job because I have the 1st, the 10th, and now we're on the 17th. Do I not know how to count, Lori? Because I did Esther.
I think that it's 3rd, the 10th. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Counting. We should all, as Christians, know how to at least count to 3. You got the Trinity and you're good. So when we come to Job, Job is one of those books in the Bible that I like, probably because I took a course in seminary on Job, and so spent some time reading it and studying it and praying about it. And so some of that is still percolating several decades later. So when I looked at this passage, I said, okay, I haven't preached on Job for the other Sundays that it was in the lectionary. What needs to be included so that members of my congregation know where I'm at, where am I coming from, what needs included in the story, what context. And even if I had preached on Job, I think all of us know at this point, you cannot assume that the people who are in your pew or on Zoom or Facebook this week were there the previous weeks. So there's always needs to be, if you're in a series, a bit of repetition or a reminding, that synopsis that we all can skip on Netflix. Do you want to skip this or go right to it? I don't think as pastors, we can skip that synopsis of where we've been so that we can have a clearer view of where we're going. So what's the context? What is included within the lectionary? The lectionary frequently skips around and does these weird, what is included and what's not included. And I think it's our responsibility as the preacher to not just say, this is what's included and I don't need to expand. So as I read this passage, which is, of course, Job 38, 1-7 and 34 through 41, I said, what's before it, what's after it, what's cut out, what else needs in there so that voices are fully heard. And as I was reading it, I thought, I need to include verses 8-11 as well. In part, well, there's really only one reason. We get feminine images of God as a midwife. I want those images included from the pulpit and from what I call sermonizing. I think the lectionary is good in some ways in offering us different parts of the Bible, but we need to look to the other parts and what's around it as well, and what might need to be included. So I am adding it to make it be 1-11 so that I can get that image of God as a midwife and so that I can get the full sentence. I also hate it when the lectionary cuts things off mid-sentence and they were walking. Well, who's the they? I like to be able to include who is the subject of my pronouns. So we have here in Job, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Well, what is the Lord answering? And I think no matter what, we need to spend that time answering the question as to what is God answering. And to know that, we have to flip back to the first chapter, where I really like the imagery there of we have Satan and God walking around, bumping into each other, and setting up pretty much a courtroom scene of Satan saying, people are only faithful because they get the good in life, but cause harm and they will curse you. And so he set up the courtroom for the Job in its entirety. We are told that Job is blameless and that he is upright. We're told that he's a good dude. And the wager is that if Satan takes away everything from Job except for his life, that he will go on and curse God and that he's only faithful because of that. And I'm going to see what's in chat. Okay, I already dealt with that. Sorry. It's again me trying to be the moderator and the presenter. So we have a courtroom scene. And in that courtroom, we have Job, we have God, we have Satan, and then we have the different friends who come and initially just sit with God, with Job. We have the Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And then later on, we have Elihu who come. And I would have to say, they're good people. To start off, they just sit with Job for a week. I don't know about you, but there's something about just having someone with you and not necessarily needing to solve your problems, but just staying with you. That's a great example of how we could be doing pastoral care. But then they open their mouths and problems start to occur because they do what all of us want to do. I know I still do it, that my 11-year-old son is not going to get COVID. He's not going to be one of those statistics. And I have all of my reasonings as to why my son is different from the 11-year-olds in school who are getting COVID. This is what the friends are doing. They're trying to say, Job has had these experiences of his family dying, boils covering his body, all of his money being taken away. He's had those experiences, but we will not because we are different from him. They're trying to rationalize why they are suffering and creating a wall of protection around themselves. Okay, maybe I'm the only one that does that, but I think we do that. So we go along and God finally decides to speak here in chapter 38. And God comes and speaks through a whirlwind and pretty much begins to show the inadequacies of the friends, of their arguments, of their justifications for why Job has suffered. Has anyone read this passage from Job yet? The majority of you are muted and you're not here. So I'm just going to make up answers for you that you have all read it and you have great answers. But in case you don't, I think when we look at this passage, there's a lot of ambiguity here. God never answers the questions that Job is posing as to why he is suffering, why he is going through the horrendous turmoil that he's going through. Instead, we kind of get, it's not kind of, we get very rhetorical questions of, were you there? Do you know? Can you explain this, that, and the other? Is what we begin to get from God. We also get a very visual images from in this passage and all throughout God's answer in 38 and 39. And it's highly structured answer, beginning with, hey, I'm the one who created the world and set everything into its foundations. I structured the earth. I stopped the water from taking over everywhere, except for until, 2021, and you guys all didn't really realize that there is such a thing as climate change, and you are responsible for your actions. God doesn't say that, but God might say that today. Like, I told you so. So we get some of that, like, did you measure the earth and make sure that it would sit on its foundations? If you didn't do this, then why do you have the questions that you do? There is a lot, I think I already said this, a lot of ambiguity. There isn't a, folks, this is the answer, stick with it, all is good in the world. Job's vision was one of which there should be justice in the world. If I'm doing what I am supposed to be doing, I should be, there should be some of that equality, there should be justice. And God just kind of doesn't even address that, but instead asks those kind of satirical, who are you to question me kind of questions. And they serve in part to show how little Job understands about the world. And I think we could say that for any of us. Our understanding of how the world works has increased dramatically from the time that Job was written. But I still can't understand how if you drop two things at the same time, they'll fall at the same rate. I mean, I remember Dr. Fairs in my physics class. Somewhere in this head is calculus-based physics from college. Don't ask me to produce any of it. But again, I've studied some of these laws of physics that came after the writings of Job, and we still can't explain how the world and all of its parts work together. So again, that's kind of what God is saying. You don't understand it all, and you probably never will. So what are you going to do with that information? How are you going to answer? And like I said, I did add verses 8 and through 11 because we have, I just like that images of, or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out of the womb, when I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed bounds for it and set bars and doors. And said, thus far shall you come and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stopped. I want to include that feminine image of God. Too frequently we only hear masculine. We need to see God as both and, more than. And I think by adding that, we can get some of that richer understanding of who God is and who we are in relationship to God. So that is kind of what where I will be going in part with this, is just kind of setting up where Job is, what we get from Job, and answering some of those questions. And I think in light of this week, I think, I don't know about you, but I was a little bit surprised by that email that came around about 3:30 yesterday afternoon.
Yeah.
And some in our congregation will have received that email. I am still waiting for my email response from one of my church members who will send an email for everything like that. I think it's appropriate for us to, it's not appropriate, it's responsible as the preachers to say, hey, this is part of our reality, that someone who we once knew as Mike is now Mary. And how do we, I want to be careful here with my language, because I think the language is very important. How do we begin to understand? How do we discuss in a church in a responsible, healing, helpful, holy way? And, I went to seminary with Dr. Stuckey. Someone else mentioned him. I believe it was Jeff Raffoff. I think he had Stuckey too. And he said, sometimes the lectionary is exactly what you need it to be when you need it to be. And I think that this is a passage that's very good for just saying, we don't understand everything. And that's okay, because ultimately God does, and that God created us and called us good. And I think that is responsible for us to have that as part of our exegesis this week of how do we discuss it, having been National Coming Out Day, and that someone who we grew to love and know and respect to have come out this past week. How do we greet her? How would we greet anyone else within our congregation? How have we made ourselves welcoming and loving? With the understanding that we weren't there when God created the heavens and the earth. So I think that is part of our responsibility this week, and Job lends itself to that discussion. So that would be, I'm always into contemporary. What is happening in our world today? Deal with that. So that in mind, I also have the latest Christian Century, if you could see. So it's the one that was October 6th. It has a beautiful clock on it.
I have that. Yeah.
And there's one of the articles is Gods of Tech. And this is going to be very confusing to me today. Did Steve Jobs create more problems than he solved, as opposed to Job and Jobs? And it talks about when Steve Jobs asked his pastor a question about a Life magazine cover that showed starving children, and asked his pastor, why are these kids starving? And the pastor did not have an answer that satisfied him. And I thought that here we have Job asking questions of God, and some of those answers not being overly satisfying, but yet there were answers there. And I thought, when we have kids, we need to be prepared for answers. And not only kids, but adults as well, who are asking those questions of why am I suffering and why aren't others? Why isn't God controlling the waters like we hear here in Job 38, saying that God will do? So we need to be able to answer those questions in responsible and helpful ways. And I think we begin to do that by saying, the answer is actually, if you read this, just in the paragraph right ahead, that Jobs says the juice goes out of Christianity when it becomes too based on faith rather than on living like Jesus or seeing the world as Jesus saw it. And again, I would not claim Steve Jobs to be a theologian as someone that I would follow as a theologian, but I think he speaks real truth here in saying that our answers might not always come in what we say, but they come in how do we walk with the Jobs around us? How do we put feet on our faith to eliminate and to alleviate some of the suffering? Beth, the magazine is the Christian Century. It is a bi-weekly periodical, and it is the October 6th edition. So you could probably find it online at Christian Century.
Thank
And
you.
it's one that I read whenever it comes, and it also has sermon fodder. It has like a 1-page sermon summary for all of the different lectionary readings. Well, not for all of them, just for one of the 4 each week.
Yeah.
But again, I thought that kind of pairs again with how are we to be responsible in our job as those who are supposed to be bringing the good news. And part of that good news is we need to be able to admit that we don't have all of the answers, but we're willing to struggle with you, and we're willing to try to find those answers with you. I'm seeing where else I am. I made notes, which is always fun. So I think that's where I would be with Job. Are there questions there before I move on? And I don't have a whole lot on the other portions because I know that my primary focus this week is on Job. I hear and see none.
I think Job would have made a great scripture series, a great sermon series the last few weeks regarding prayer and petition and lament and, the world that we're living in the last 18 months and how many people have cried out to God for answers to what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, Job does offer an answer in 1:9 of, hey, God gives us the good and the bad, which again, okay, that's nice, but does that offer us comfort? I don't. Yes, God does give us the good and the bad. And we do our best to be faithful.
Well, I think we have to finish out Job to get the conclusion to all this. Job's response, because when God's questioning goes on for a couple more chapters.
Right, right.
And Job finally says, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I misspoke." Yeah, and then God blesses him. So. I don't know. Is Job in next week's lectionary reading?
Job is, I was flipping ahead that Job is there next week as all. I am not preaching next week because I am going to the pumpkin patch. It's our annual pumpkin patch extravaganza with the in-laws. So you could, but again, it's not so much his answer in the next week as I'm looking forward. So again, I think that's why we have to sometimes tack other portions on to the lectionary so that we can give a full answer.
If you look at Psalm 104, which is also in the lectionary.
We're going to get there because I am going to get there because I think it's, I think it is the Psalm 104, and that's my first reading for this week. So my readings are the Psalm 104 and the Job 38.
Right. They mirror each other.
They do. And I think sometimes it's nice when the lectionary does that makes these good connections.
Yeah.
That the Psalm 104 is, it's a beautiful psalm of creation that really does echo what we hear in Job. And the tradition of just praising God based on the beauty and glory of creation. And if I could, I would show you the deer that walked by about an hour ago back through my back window. The beauty that we can see and appreciate here. I am very disappointed that in both our passage from Job 38 and then from 104, we missed Leviathan. I mean, why do you skip out on not putting in the sea creatures? You just got to include them because, again, I think that shows us some of the beauty of creation and that idea that there's Leviathan put into the waters kind of as a pet or a plaything for God, something that's big and I don't see Leviathan or as scary, but just as fun. And so I think if I were doing a children's sermon, maybe I would talk about these sea creatures that we have both in Job and again here in Psalm 104. When I look, I guess I could share my table. I've taken pictures of this is Pastor Mandy preparing a sermon, and I have my whole table full. So I have my, which side? The New Interpreter's Bible. I don't know, you can figure it out. The New Interpreter's Bible is out here. I already showed you, I have the Christian Century out. I have multiple Bibles. And for 104, I was looking at Roland Murphy's The Gift of Psalms. I like this one maybe better than the New Interpreter's Bible for the Psalms. It just gives like a one-page verse by verse kind of, this is some of the historical aspects of what this psalm might be. This is how it mirrors some of the other stuff that was going on in the ancient Egypt or wherever we are. The Pharaoh, I'm not going to say this right, Akhenaton, the hymn to the sun, so that we get some of those allusions to other literature that was there at the time. And the name of the book is The Gift of the Psalms, and it's by Roland Murphy. It was written in June of 2000, if you're looking for that.
Christian Book Distributors has it.
Okay, yeah, it is older, but I think it's still relevant. I try to find new stuff as well, which is kind of why I make sure I have a Christian century by me, so that I'm not only drawing from people who are now dead. I think that's important as we are doing our sermon prep. But I like him. I actually took one of his courses in seminary. At Wesley, you had to go around to other seminaries, and I took one from him. So that is what I like for that. Again, I'm preaching on the Job, so I would probably pull in the 104 to say the language that we hear in Job is also heard in other parts of our Bible, of the power of God in creation. The passage from Hebrews, I would just say, good luck preaching that on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a passage for the pulpit unless you have people that you know are going to show up week after week and for whom you can build an understanding of the book of Hebrews. There is a pile to unpack just in these 10 verses here that I think would be better done with dialogue than with the monologue that most of us have in a pulpit. Just understanding, although Jesus was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. I mean, just that verse alone, the baggage involved there is beyond the weight limit on all airlines. So you just need a different location to be able, I think, to responsibly touch Hebrews. Or you need to be preaching 5 hours, which I get bored of listening to myself, so that's not going to happen. The Mark 10 passage is very similar to that which was on World Communion Sunday, back on, back on the 19th of September. The whole who gets to be first, who gets to be second, who gets to sit at my right hand, at my left hand, and Jesus saying, you guys, you're not getting it. So because I just preached that last month, I guess it could be appropriate because it took the disciples a while to get it, but I don't want to deal with that again so soon. So I'll just kind of let that one be. And as my church organist reminds me, I like preaching the Old Testament. That's just what I like preaching. And I think in part it's because the stories that are there, and that we haven't told those stories. And I think when we tell these stories, we can get a stronger foundation to our faith and understanding that none of us are perfect, and yet God can still use us. But also to be careful who we call out as our heroes, and that we understand what their flaws were. So that's what I have for today. So that took us, 36 minutes, so like 34 once I let everyone in. Are there questions? Again, I always ask questions, comments, concerns is how I usually invite discussion within my Bible studies.
I have just a comment. When I do sermons, I don't necessarily concentrate just on one. One might be my featured one. In this case, I join you in Job. But I always look at all 4 scriptures to find that tie, that common thread, that thing that connects them all. And what I've been seeing in this particular selection is God is answering Job saying, hey, look, this is the first time I'm talking with you. I've heard you, but you're forgetting that I am here. Who was the one that did all this stuff?
Right.
Who has come to you? Who has laid the cornerstone, who has done all this. And in essence, Job's supposed to be answering that himself within his own heart and spirit. And I read the others, and they're talking about the others, the fact that, Jesus in Hebrews and also in Mark is saying that, it's not just up to humans to take these positions on. Some of them, as they're talking about in Hebrews, someone is maybe assigned to it, that special person, but God is taking care of it. And Mark is saying also that you two don't necessarily need to sit next to me. Can you handle this? And they're saying they are, but he's saying it's not necessarily your position there. God's in charge. God is going to be there. God's going to take care of it. He's always going to be there. And so this is the common thread, and those aren't exactly what I would say. This Sunday is Lady Sunday, and the kids are taking over. We've got kids and youth taking over. They're not touching the lectionary.
I would hope not. I mean, this is just.
Yeah, and I am, I'm here just to learn from other voices, which I love about this gathering. And I don't always get here on Tuesdays, but I see that thread, and I would refine it more, because I probably didn't say exactly what I wanted to say here, but that's what I'm looking at. I'm seeing Job is finally hearing from God, and God is saying, look, I have done all this. I am here. Let's, don't worry about it. It's his beginning of calming him down and saying, I am here. And so that Job can continue with his relationship with God, which he's been struggling with this entire time. I mean, he's saying, is he here? Is he not? And yet he's talking to God.
And he never curses God, which is the point of the wager, that he never curses.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I've been saying in my sermons. That God, Job never, ever curses. He does not ever, ever curse God. I mean, he follows through with exactly God said. God knew what was going to happen and what wasn't. So that's my story.
Thanks, Lori.
I just wanted to add, when you were talking about bringing in more feminine voices, that Will Gaffney out at Bright Divinity School created the Womanist Lectionary. So if you might want to look up the Womanist Lectionary. And it just adds somebody has it. Mandy has it.
Me. I already have it.
That's good stuff.
I like it. I'm struggling with
Can you hold that up again?
Sure. It's a women's lectionary for the whole church, and they call it Year W for women.
Thank you.
I like it. I haven't figured out fully how I'm going to use it. Kevin, have you used it?
I have not, because I'm not actively preaching at this time.
Oh, well, that would make, yeah. So this would be the Sunday closest to, so there, she's not even using Job. So she's using, again, because it's 1 year, not every, is using 2 Samuel. I like it. But you have to be willing to go off of the 3-year lectionary. And sometimes I'm better at doing that than other times. And it really comes down to how much energy do I have, because when we go off the 3-year lectionary, there are just so many resources available. My gift is not for writing liturgy. I appreciate the liturgy that others write. And so I spend my time better when I'm able to glean from other resources. But yes, I do have that. This came out probably in August, I think. Oh no, I have lots of, yeah. Because I mean, you can always use the New Testament and Psalms and inclusive version that would do just about everything to get away from masculine language of God. So when appropriate, I pull that in. I'm a child who grew up in an inclusive language family and an inclusive, I'll just leave it there. You don't need to hear my family stories and of me as a 5-year-old. Well, thank you, everyone. I will tell Dawn that I let everyone in, including people who joined at, 2:42, and maybe next week's person will take the whole hour, but I am not one who ever feels the need to just fill time to fill time. I always had to make every paper I ever write stretch out, just because I was a debater in college. Say as much as you can quickly and then go on. So have a good day, everyone. Good luck, Godspeed with these passages, and get Leviathan into that picture. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm looking for the end here. There we go.